Hello, and welcome to this bonus episode of Only Lovers Book Club. Usually, we're here reading and discussing romance novels, but for the past couple of weeks, we have been talking about the ultimatum queer love because we just had to. It just had to. If you're wondering how it all started and how it went as we were watching, I'll put some cards up so you can watch us react to the first few episodes and then the second half. And today we're going to discuss the reunion, and then we're going to give kind of like our concluding thoughts about the experience of watching the show and watching it together. If that sounds cool, then make sure to subscribe, like the video. And if you're listening to us, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a nice little review for all the lovely emotional labor that we've been doing recapping this. I know no one asked us to, but I mean, if you wanted to, I wouldn't be mad. Anyway. We okay, so we're recording this a week after we actually watched it. We watched episodes 5 through 9.
For those of you who don't know, we're on opposite sides of the country, different time zones, so watching stuff together can be a little tricky.
For the reunion, we watched it together via teleparty, and I want to know how that was for you. We knew how the show ended, but then kind of like seeing everybody come back and get together, like what were you nervous? Were you excited, or what were your expectations, if any?
I was not nervous or excited. I went into the reunion with very low expectations. I had very little faith that most of the couples would still be together. And it was more so just me being curious how they would react to each other, after the show. Like I wanted to watch like the dynamics between them, because sometimes people break up and it's very amicable, and sometimes people break up and it's not. And so I was more curious to see like how those breakups went, because I assumed that everyone would have broken up.
Yes, I feel like I want to insert a clip of you in the last last recording, like every single couple is gonna be, I don't think anyone's gonna stay together. Like,
it is what it is. I don't think any couple in the show will have a lasting relationship. This show took me very, very high, and then it like plummeted me down, and I'm like still crawling my way back up. I've talked to Kris about this too. I'm like, I'm not even in the mood to read romance. I'm like, I'm done with love. Like that's what Xander and Yoli did to me. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, I can't say that I went into the reunion feeling particularly optimistic. And so that's why I was extra glad to be watching it with you, because at least, I could have someone to kind of chat with, and it wouldn't be, I'd be sad, but I wouldn't be sad alone.
That's the best way to be sad with someone else.
Yeah.
I thought everybody looked good. Let's start with the positives. And just like a heads up, like if you're the kind of person who is like me and for the most part doesn't watch reality TV shows and would rather just sit through a recap, part of today's discussion is going to deal with intimate partner violence, domestic violence. And so if that's not something that you're interested in hearing us talk about, if you just don't feel great about hearing couples in a domestic violence situation, let alone queer couples, then feel free to either I'll put up a card with a time for you to avoid, or just peace out. But make sure to like the video before you leave. Okay. There wasn't a lot of time between me watching the finale and me watching the reunion. I avoided as many spoilers as possible, even though some things did like leak through. And that's okay. And so I started watching the reunion with my heart in the pit of my stomach. I was not prepared to see everybody reacting to the drama that we saw throughout the season. But then also, even though I was kind of prepared for the worst, like nothing could have prepared me for like the shit show that kind of like occurred during the whole throughout most of it. And it was like I was surprised, disappointed, and really upset. And it kind of, I don't know if it happened for you, but it's not like it painted the rest of the show in a bad light, but it definitely has made me consider watching one of these shows again in the future. Like, not that I won't, but it's just maybe with the way that I approach it might be a little bit different.
Let's start with the couple that I think or the couples that I think we talked about the most, over our episodes, which was Xander and Vanessa and Yoli and Mal. I mean, obviously, we went into it knowing that Xander and Vanessa had obviously broken up because they left without each other. Were you surprised to hear that they hadn't really been talking? That, did you think they were going to be like friends after? Like, was there anything about their dynamic on the reunion that like surprised you?
No, it didn't surprise me that they were not talking. And it's just I think it's for the best. I think it's for the best. I mean, I know that, it was a little bit heartbreaking to see them kind of talk about each other, because I think that they both at that point understood that they weren't going to have like a friendship going forward, even though there had been false starts and, I think people ghosted each other, and it is what it is. But it was also like not nice to see, but I think it's important for people to see that you can still be sad about a relationship ending without that being a reason to not leave that relationship, right? So when we see Xander and Vanessa enter the ultimatum, they are clearly like not working. They're on completely different pages. And the reason that they're staying together is because of this like weird loyalty of like, okay, we've come this far, right? That sunk cost fallacy. We've come this far. We owe it to ourselves to keep trying. Whereas at the end, there's still like feelings there, but there's also the recognition of this isn't working and we are better off together. I also was really into Vanessa's like darker hair. And I remember being like, ooh, dark Vanessa. Like,
yeah, I remember you making that comment. What about did you have any expectations about Xander and Yoli and how they would react to each other?
I tried not to. I think after the complete and utter heartbreak of the finale, I was also like, whatever. Like I had already made my peace with the fact that my ship didn't work out. And so when they kind of talked about, Yoli talks about Mal and her breaking up very shortly after they left the show. And that they had tried, Yoli and Xander had tried to hang out again, keep talking or whatever. I kind of literally flashed back to you talking about how that ship had sailed. Like if Yoli had chosen Xander, if they had like maybe tried it and then broken up, I feel like it would not have been quite as over, like capital O over.
Xander currently seems like very committed to just being alone and working on her career, and Yoli's like living up the single life in a very different way than Xander. Like they're both single right now, but very differently. And I think that they're not going to do it just because we all want them to do. They're not going to fake it, and I do think, like you said, that if Yoli had chosen Xander in the show, I do think they would still be together. But I think that not being chosen is really hard to organically get over. You know what I mean? Like, if I was Xander, I don't know that I could know that Yoli chose Mal and then only came to me after that didn't work out. Like, I don't think I could live with that.
Speaking of, Mal and Vanessa and Yoli and Xander, that quadrangle of like complicated that quadrangle of like complicated feelings. Like by the time I saw on Mal's Instagram that, or I read somewhere that one of their family members had died shortly before they went to record the reunion. I know that made emotions even higher. Like I feel like they were high to begin with. It was great to see Mal doing great. But even still kind of like extending a little bit of like grace to Yoli after they're kind of like talking about things that, Mal said were happily broken up and things didn't work out. And later on when they're talking about Yoli and Xander, and when Mal like would watch, obviously Mal says, "Oh, you made me look like a fool in the streets." Fine. But I even watch it, and it's cute to watch someone fall in love, and I think you deserve to like try it, very much like And then once again, we find out that like Yoli has been kind of like doing something that Mal is just not kind of aware of. I feel like Mel knew that Yoli and Xander were still talking, but didn't know that they had tried to meet up. And this is all kind of like brought out because Vanessa is like, oh, but like they did try it. And
But I
her
will
little
say though,
smile.
I will say that, like, I don't think Mal necessarily needs to be informed, if they're broken up. It's just that Vanessa always knows everything. I don't know how. And she loves just sharing with the group.
Seriously.
I mean, it is what it is. Like, I think like people like to get really angry on Mal's behalf, for everything that went down with Yoli and Xander. I do think that relationship would have ended regardless. Like, I think, so it is one of those things. It sucks the way it went down. And I do feel bad for Mal and everything that she went through. And I really do admire how open she was to exploring like alternative ways of making their relationship work, like and just being very like in tune with what Yoli was dealing with. Like, I really like that. But I do think the relationship would have ended whether or not there had been a Xander in the picture. And yeah, hopefully, the next person that comes along, will be a different experience. And I do think that Mal will now be more emotionally available, than perhaps they were with Yoli. Because I know Yoli said that too, and that like, I'm not really dating, but when I do date, I'm gonna take people at face value for what they tell me, because I read an interview where she was like, the minute I met Mal was like, I'm emotionally unavailable, and I still dated them, so it's like so so Yoli is now too like, okay, I can't go like I can't go expecting things from a person who's already being upfront and telling me that they can't do certain things. So I think all four people in that quadruple or whatever, however you said it, I think all four of them are currently single and really like working on themselves and enjoying learning more about themselves, and I'm happy for all four of them, honestly.
Ozzy and Sam are still together in the reunion, right? They haven't
and they're
gotten
still
married.
together now, which is quite some time after the reunion was filmed. So the reunion was filmed last year, I think. So yeah, they are still together. They are still planning to get married,
and I'm happy for them. Like, I know that people like want them to be married like now, but I think, right, Ozzy and Sam seemed good. They seemed like content. That genuinely brought me like a lot of joy.
It's kind of wild when you think about it. Like, we feel like we've been on such a journey, but like we're watching such a tiny bit of it. Like, I think I saw someone say how like every time they sat around that long table, like when they picked their their new marriage people, and then when they went back to their original people, like every time they were at that table, that they were there for like 6 hours. And we see like 10 minutes
10 minutes of it. Yeah.
Ozzy and Sam are good. I think to this day, not a single person has a bad thing to say about Sam. Like, I've seen other cast members make jokes about it. It's I think I saw like Tiff and someone else were like doing recaps of an episode or something, and the other person was like, okay, but like the only person we haven't said anything about is Sam. And the person who's not in the ultimatum was like, I don't. And eventually they were like, Sam, I really hated that cardigan you wore on episode. Like, what? Because it's like, what else? They couldn't think of a single other thing to say. So I think like they're good. Sam and Aussie are good. They're doing their own thing. What about Lexi and Ray? Because they were kind of the shocker, I think. People didn't expect them to still be together. And then they watched the reunion and were like, oh shit, they're still together. And then it was just like that black card at the end of the reunion.
Yeah.
They're not together.
I'm not gonna say that I like cheered when I saw the card, but I was like, oh, thank God. We talked about it a little bit in our last kind of like get together. I don't remember how you put it, but it was really well said. Something about basically how Ray sees all of these red flags, but like
that what she learned wasn't enough to counter the love that she felt for Lexi.
I don't know what you said.
I was unhappy when they proposed to each other because I didn't think that they were going to be a long-term pairing. Um, I was surprised to see them together at the reunion. And then I felt bad because then once the whole Fingergate conversation restarted, it became very clear to me that this is not just something that like the host is bringing up at this reunion. It's something that clearly has continued to be brought up in Ray and Lexi's relationship. Just looking at the way like Ray was reacting to things and stuff made it clear that what I thought was going to happen, which was that this would be this like elephant in the room always in their relationship, was actually happening. And so that made me sad, and I was happy to see that they had broken up, only because I think Ray deserves not to feel like a shitty person, you know, in her relationships, like moving forward.
Yes, I agree. And I still think that like their relationship got really toxic. Maybe not to the extent that others were, but yeah, I think that they just both had like a lot to learn
Yeah.
apart from each other after this experience. And so while I never like it when people are obviously going through something like really difficult, I was kind of relieved to see them not be together anymore. You know, I was like, oh, okay. Now they can be truly happy, because I mean, me from all the way over here and like my high horse couch being like, these people don't belong together, but like based on what we saw in the show, I just felt like
Yeah.
they could do a little bit better for themselves. I mean, I've been reading a couple of recaps as well, as not spoiling myself, but then after we record, I go back and I check like what other people have said. One of them being Carmen Maria Machado's Cup of Stars kind of like Substack newsletter. And I read it and I didn't really catch, I think at first, that a lot of other people, or at least Carmen, had kind of seen these like intimate partner violence tendencies between Mildred and Tiff. And that made me so sad. I was like, "Oh, of course." That makes a lot of sense. But I think that we were all, or at least I was, of the mind of, oh, this is like messy queer drama. And these lesbians are so messy and this drama, and they're, you know, them being all flip floppy. And then when you kind of go back and you analyze their interactions and how like Mildred was constantly breaking up with Tiff and, you know, all of the things that it was, now it's obvious to me that they were in something that like went beyond that like toxic manipulation, like lesbian drama that we were kind of like
Yeah.
labeling it as. During the reunion, it comes out that, well, Tiff and Mildred are not together anymore, that their breakup was pretty acrimonious, and that there was even an instance in which the police were called and that Mildred was arrested for having thrown a dog gate at Tiff. And then also there were mentions of other instances of, you know, just like Mildred like hitting Tiff. It's just like layers and layers of awful, because at no point did Netflix prepare the audience for what was about to happen. At no point did the host prepare anybody for what was about to happen. The cast members' reactions were a little disappointing. Some of them, of course, you know, not talking about Sam, like the other MVP, but you know, when they start arguing and Mildred is pretty much just like steamrolling over Tiff, not letting them talk, you know, trying to make herself seem like the victim in the situation. And after that whole altercation happens and Sam goes out to help Tiff kind of like calm down, Tiff leaves the show, and then like they keep talking like if nothing happened. No one kind of jumps in. See, this is what makes me upset about people being, yeah, put Vanessa in her place, because when they needed to gang up on someone, like they actively knew how to do that. Like
Yeah.
Lexi and Yoli got everyone to pretty much gang up on Vanessa during the Fingergate discussion while the show was
I
taping.
think, unfortunately, I think that is a matter of like people being uneducated in what domestic assault is and what it can look like. I think we do a very poor job of informing people, and you know that's also partly why you see so many people kind of trapped in relationships that they don't know how to get out of because they don't recognize the signs, you know, until they get to the point where it's like this person will murder me if I leave. But you know, there was a roadmap before that, and people just don't know how to recognize it in their own relationships or in other people's. Like it's not talked about enough. And I think when it is talked about, it's in like a very specific scenario that people then have in their heads. That sometimes I think doesn't transfer to when people are thinking either that doesn't transfer either to what people think of as queer relationships or even situations where you might have like two cis, you know, a cis man and a cis woman, but the woman is the abuser, you know, like there's a lot of different situations that I think if they deviate from that one image that people have in their minds, they can't see it. And so I think like the cast in that moment, especially because they've seen them argue so much before, I think like I'd be curious to see. I don't think anyone is going to speak up about this because so much time has happened and I think people just want to let the past be past. But I would be curious to see if any of them, you know, after the fact were like, oh shit, like this was happening and I didn't like recognize it in the moment and I didn't react the way that I would have wanted to react because I got caught up in, you know what I mean? Like I want to think that with time the cast members have realized, you know, what actually was happening. I think in my part, like you, I did not see this coming. I did think they were a very emotionally abusive couple and very like gaslighty and manipulative. Um, but I didn't assume that that transferred into violent, like physical violence as well. For me, emotional abuse is plenty enough reason to leave a relationship, and that's one of the reasons why I did not want them to get together because I just thought they were so bad
Yeah.
for each other.
Mhm.
They put each other in such toxic spaces that I thought was terrible, and I was very unhappy that they got together in the finale. But
I know. I feel like neither of us were. When I predicted that they were going to end up together, it wasn't like with like a happy. It was just like
right. It
this
was just
feels
like this is their
inevitable.
pattern. Yeah,
Hmm.
they completely continue to get together. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I think Mildred was very smart in the way that she went about it on the show because she definitely painted Tiff as this like jealous, vindictive person who like called the cops just to get her in trouble and she got arrested just because Tiff made that call as opposed to she got arrested because the police arrived and found enough evidence that, you know, she had been causing them harm in that particular moment that you know they had no choice but to arrest her, you know, like
Hmm.
following protocols. So yeah, I think she did a very good job of like pitching it in a certain way. I think you and I, you know, have had enough like life experiences, either our own or people we know, have read enough, have seen enough things that the minute Mildred started talking, we were both like in the chat because again we're watching this together. We were in the
Hmm.
chat like, oh my gosh, like holy shit. But you know, I don't think necessarily that was the reaction of the cast and the host. I do know that for a fact that like producers and all that, they knew what had gone
Yes.
down.
Hmm.
So I don't know if everybody was just assuming it wouldn't come up.
Basically, Mildred didn't let Tiff get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
Went in accusation after accusation after accusation. The fact that Mildred was arrested did come up, but at no point I think it was given enough space for people to react, for Tiff to really respond. And I
And
mean,
I think we did talk about this, you know, after the fact of like what is a host's responsibilities and you know, I bring this up as an example because I have seen it done well in other shows. You know, I watched Survivor and there was a season in which a cast member outed someone who was not out, In a really just in a really terrible way. The way they phrased it, it was like at a voting session, and they basically were like, everyone should vote this person out because they are a liar. This person is trans and they have been lying about who they actually are, like the entire time they've been on the show. So it was like a very violent way to out someone as well. I remember watching that and just like going completely cold because I was like so horrified. But the host of Survivor immediately stopped everything and was like, stop, like we need to talk about this. And that episode ended up being he gave space for the person who was outed. Well, first of all, ask that person, if they wanted to talk, like what they wanted to happen. But like basically he made it clear, like this episode or this night is not going to go as we had planned. We're going to talk about this if people want to talk about it. He opened up space for everyone to talk. And then at the end was like, well, I don't think we need to actually vote. Like, raise your hand if you want this person to go. And everybody raised their hand. There was no ballots. Everyone just like publicly voted out the person who had outed. And it felt so like gratifying to it was one of those moments where I'm like, man, some people are true allies. Like for real, and that's what I would have liked to see from this. I would have liked to see the reunion stopped and like we're gonna talk about it, and we're maybe gonna remove both people. Clearly these two people don't need to be near each other, and by Tiff and Mildred. But they like didn't address it at all. Like you said, they went on as if nothing had happened. And then, they put up a black card for Ray and Lexi breaking up, but where's the black card for,
like,
oh, we're sorry that you just witnessed X, Y, and Z. If you are going through X, Y, and Z, here are some resources, or I don't know, like something.
Anything, even kind of acknowledgement. And what sucked was that then we got to see some reactions from the cast, but it was, it felt like Sam and Ozzy sticking up for Tiff, Ozzy having lived with Mildred for a while and saying how Mildred made Ozzy feel gaslit. And it's just like I feel like Ozzy definitely caught onto a couple of things, and then afterwards, Sam, supporting Tiff, they knew, and they jumped in to defend Tiff, but there was no stopping Mildred. And what I was sad about is that no one else said anything. But then even worse is that Yoli was like, "Do you want some water?" That was a lot, and then it made Yoli seem like whether she likes the portrayal of herself now or not, but as like someone who capes for someone who is a domestic abuser.
I think that was maybe her first instinct as someone who was close to Mildred on the show. And you see that happen in real life all the time, right? Like you say, oh no, my friend could never do that, or my family member could never do that. Like they probably heard a lot of things from Mildred about how much of a liar Tiff was and how much. And so, I'm going with like Yoli was maybe brainwashed by Mildred over the course of the show. You know what I mean? As Mildred probably does with everybody in her circle. I'm sure she has all of her friends thinking certain things about Tiff. And so I'm trying to look at it that way. I will say if I did see them do something together on social media, you know what I mean, like her and Mildred, then I'd be like, okay, I cannot extend the grace any longer.
But I do think that the least people could do is just maybe in a general sense denounce domestic violence. I think that would be one thing that you could do. Ozzy, I feel, posted something about narcissistic abuse, and everyone's like, oh, wait a minute, was that about, because
and maybe in the future, that something will come up. It's only been what, like a week since the reunion, so it takes time to to make content. Maybe something will come out, or maybe it never will, and that's something that they just choose to not speak about, and it is what it is. Like I'm not like I told you earlier, like I'm probably not going to be following most of these people like a week from now. I was definitely following them this week so I could see kind of what they were up to now for when we talked in our episode.
If anyone needs to like hear it from Tiff, they released a video like
Yes.
yesterday, very shortly. Like I'm probably gonna edit this and post it like next week, but I'll link that video here, and then you can hear because Tiff did not get to defend themselves on the
Yeah.
reunion, and so I think that I was really happy to see them at least kind of like speak their piece, and they don't come at it like I'm a perfect person. But during the time, you know, that they've been away from the show, they've been doing a lot of work on themselves. They don't claim to be a perfect person, but they do recognize the manipulative pattern that they were both in and how, you know, after they moved in together with Mildred and Mildred's son, how things pretty much shook out. We'll see. Time will tell, like what
Mhm.
will happen. And then you're right; these are real people. I think I'm just always going to try to stick by like the victim, and I'm going to try to defend them as much as possible. So I think that's that as far as the reunion. But yeah, really disappointing to see Netflix not taking more care, especially because this was a show that
Yeah.
meant a lot to people, having it be
Yeah,
like the
and
first
I will
fully
say like
queer
that's
show.
that's who really I'm most disappointed in because at the end of the day, the cast of the Ultimatum, they're all humans. I can't expect them to all act perfectly in situations or the way I would want them to act. But I can expect a production company who is editing these things and putting them together for the purpose of like public consumption to kind of do the right thing. And all shows do this. Like you could watch a freaking like unsolved mysteries from like 1980 and it will say like if you have been affected by whatever, call this number. You know what I mean? Like that's all that's all it takes. So and I feel like if shows that are only like a tiny bit involved with anything that could be triggering can put that up, a show where it happens live on camera, you know, it can definitely do that. And so for me, that's who I'm most disappointed in is the whole production team, and the hostess because I feel like that's part of your responsibility, unfortunately. If you are hosting a panel, if you are hosting a show, if you are hosting whatever, like it is your job to do damage control if things go sideways, whatever damage control might mean. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, you can't count on like 10 people to act a certain way, but you should be able to count on one person to like do that. So for me, those are the people I'm most disappointed in.
Mhm.
And not as much the cast just because I think
Yeah,
it's
there's
hard,
levels here. I don't wanna
Yeah.
hold anyone to task, but definitely the people who are, like, publishing the show and putting it out there for us to consume, it did need to go that way. It did need to be that way. You could have prepped me a little bit better because that was really shocking to see. So,
Yeah.
I wish them all the best, except for Mildred. And I hope that for the next year they get, like if they make the show again. I feel like they have to though, because it was kind of a success.
It made them a lot of money, I feel like. So for that reason alone,
I
yes.
I wish that Netflix had done a better job with their first fully queer dating reality show. I wish that they had just taken a little bit more care, especially finding out about the stuff that they knew beforehand. And then they maybe have a host who is part of the community, right? That they're,
Natasha.
you know, pick one of the friends. Also, yeah, maybe Natasha. Honestly, Natasha should host the next season. Anyway, now that we've reached the end of our journey through the ultimatum queer love, do you feel a type of way about reality shows, about queer reality shows, about your experience watching them or watching this one with me? Any closing thoughts?
I think what I've realized, I do watch a lot of reality shows, not just the romantic kind,
Mhm.
like, and I watch a lot of survival ones too, and not like Survivor level survival, but like actual. If you're taking Survivor recommendation shows from me, Alone by the History Channel is by far the best one. Um, I think I just realized that I definitely watch uh reality shows and I think dating reality shows um as an escapist sort of thing, like, oh, I deal with a lot of anxiety day to day, despite taking medication for it. I still experience a lot of anxiety every day. And so these shows are like a fun thing that I can watch and like not really think about my problems. Um, and I'm also someone who's obviously very interested in people and like why they make the decisions they do, why they think the way they do, why they, and that is part of why I love reading and writing. And so I think like dating shows specifically like hit that perfect niche for me where it's like a very escapist fun thing while also I'm getting to like learn more about people. You could argue like a certain kind of people who enters these shows, but still people that I wouldn't maybe normally encounter in my day-to-day life. And watching The Ultimatum hasn't put me off of that. It's just made me realize that there's a reason why I've avoided shows like Love is Blind. Because The Ultimatum and Love is Blind, which I haven't seen, but I'm going to assume is in the same category, are in that category of reality dating shows that are not fun and escapist and superficial. They're actually like really fucking sad. And I don't want to watch those. Or I mean, I would be open to watching them. I would be open to watching this again if it was a queer season, only because I know you'd watch it with me, and because I'm always trying to amplify queer representation across all genres, and that includes dating reality shows. But for me personally, and what I like to do in my free time, I this has really helped me understand why I pick the dating shows that I pick, because I think we've talked about this before. Where like we have a friend who watches Love Is Blind, and I'm always like, oh, that's not my cup of tea. But then I'll go watch like Too Hot to Handle and Are You the One and and Love Island UK and all of these other like Perfect Match. All these are like trash shows. And now I realize why, because those shows have never broken my heart.
Mm-hmm.
They've never made me like want to cry. They've never made me want to like throw my laptop across the room. Like that is not what they bring into my life. So that is my closing thought, is I have discovered something new about myself. um I crying over romances is something that I might seek out in other genres like books, but I don't want it in my dating shows. I just don't. I got too invested. I fell too hard. They were too real to me, and I'm still not over it.
In typical queer fashion as well. I feel like your emotional trajectory was very much like of the
I
U-Haul
was right there
variety.
with them. I was right there with them. 100%. Did not think they were moving too fast. I was there.
So it's funny because I generally avoid reality shows, and watching this hasn't really changed my opinion about that. I don't see myself like seeking out more. I do have a I do have more of a, not a respect. I feel like watching the show, and because it went to places where I wasn't expecting it, it did open up a lot of like really interesting conversations, obviously between you and me, but also between me and my sister who I watched it with, and with myself, about things. I always try to, if anything, at the least try to reflect on where I am emotionally in regards to how I'm connecting with other people. And so it kind of made me have those kind of conversations with myself and with people around me. And I always think that's good. I always think it's good to reflect and learn a little bit about yourself when you're watching something, like, right, media, literature being like a window and a door. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you can sort of reflect using those things, and seeing a lot of, queer relationships and dynamics, healthy and toxic, are are helpful to see that, and you kind of can figure out where you stand in like the Mal to Mildred spectrum of like how in touch you are with your own emotions and with like everybody else's. Um and I think that I made it through this because I was watching it with you. And because of that, I think even though your feelings were like really destroyed for this, I would do it again. I would definitely do it again
Yeah.
because
No,
it
I will second that though. The second that scene between Yoli and Xander ended at the finale, if I had not been watching the show with you, I would have closed my computer and walked away from the show forever. I would not have finished watching anything. Maybe I would have like Googled to see like who ended up together or whatever, but I would have definitely DNF'd this show because I was like that upset. So if I had not been watching with you, I would not have made it through.
I'm not really optimistic about Netflix and their handling of, mental health issues coming up with their participants on their dating shows. Or I guess now talking about instances of domestic violence and protecting their cast members from that and their audience. But that being said, my hope is that with the popularity of this show, we'll get something else. We'll get something more. I'm not like really optimistic about it, but I am hopeful that we're kind of like moving in that direction, especially because of the visibility, just because of, all the things that are going on. I think we're getting crumbs, and I'm just hoping at some point we'll get to the whole like bread.
And maybe now people are ready for it. And maybe now Are You the One will be like, holy shit, Netflix made so much money. Maybe we should try a queer season again, or maybe other shows will be like Ultimatum Queer Love was so insanely popular. Like, this is our chance to capitalize and make money. And, their reasons may not be the right reasons, but I'm just saying, I agree. I think maybe shows that have tried it a little bit in the past might want to try again now.
I would love if like The Bachelorette was all queer. You know what I mean? Like if I would watch that. I would be very much into something like that.
And the Bachelor or The Bachelorette, they are shows that are primed for that. Like you could very easily have a queer season without altering absolutely anything about how the show runs. Like whereas with other shows, and we've talked about this, like Love Island, it would be a lot harder to make it all queer. But you're right, they could have a queer bachelor, they could have a queer bachelorette, and they really wouldn't have to change a single thing about the setup.
Of course they wouldn't, because that show is like super, I feel like it's super Christian, and I'm just saying, like, I would be down to watch that, and I hope that like down the line we get something like
maybe
that.
maybe they call it, they do like a spin-off, so it's not The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, it's like The Fiancé. And it's like the queer spin-off.
The Fiancé.
I will say, I think I have watched a few seasons of The Bachelor, not anytime recently. Like, I think that was like way, way back when I first gave reality dating shows a try, and I was like, this is not for me. And then I never tried it again for a really long time. That's one of those shows I just don't watch. But I would watch a queer one, and I think we could watch that with a lot less heartbreak than the Ultimatum Queer Love.
I mean, people make like brackets like about
I think the setup of like people going home each week and short little dates, and I think that would make it less intense for me and you, and more fun, because we could have our predictions like from the start. And we could have like prizes along the way.
Yeah.
Now I want that.
Yeah, I want it to. The Fiancé.
The Fiancé.
Thanks for coming on this journey, Drea, and you listener/watcher. Thank you for coming on this journey. That's going to be the end of our discussion for the Ultimatum Queer Love. If you're still listening, if you're still listening or watching, leave us a comment, leave us a DM us, let us know, like, how you felt about everything.
Unless, and I said this last episode, if you are a Yoli Xander hater, do not come in the comments. Don't upset me, please. I can't take it right now.
Yeah, okay. Spare Drea a little bit of
just go into Kris's DMs.
Yeah. That wraps up this bonus episode of Only Lovers Book Club. Thank you so much for making it to the end with us. It was a hard road. We're happy you're here with us. And make sure to like the video or leave us a comment. And if you're listening, don't forget to leave us a review. 5 stars for the 5-star queers. You can support Only Lovers Book Club by subscribing to our shows and sharing our episodes. You can also drop some change into our tip jar or buy some books from our bookshop, especially if you love, sex, romance, all that good stuff. And you can find us on Instagram at Only Lovers Book Club.